Chapter 4, Sidewinder. Next morning at breakfast, Sally noticed the bruise on his face from when he'd gone down in the dirt.
Slipped and fell, he said. Guess I had one beer too many.
She seemed to accept his explanation. The big man came by to see you last night after you went out. That Omar. I told him I didn't know when you'd be home. He didn't say what he wanted to see you about.
Did you open the door for him?
Sure. He don't scare me none.
I should not imagine anyone scares you. Omar's all right. You can let him in. But in the future, I'd prefer you don't let anyone else in. Except me, that is.
Sure. He wasn't certain he believed her. 3 miners showed up that morning for epidermal illumination. Nathaniel had decided to use that term when he got his permanent sign painted. Sally watched closely while he worked on the clients. He resolved to try to buy some rawhide later. When the clients had departed, he told her,
I expect we'll start seeing our heaviest traffic on Saturdays after the shift ends. That's when the miners get a few drinks under their belts and decide they want tattoos.
How many miners are there in this town?
I think around 2,000 or so.
That's a lot of tattoos. You better stop teaching me.
I'm not sure I want the competition, he said.
It was still before noon when he closed the shop and headed for the Board of Trade. On the way, he passed a newsboy loudly hawking that morning's edition. He stopped to buy a paper, wondering if Hernandez's feature story about him had appeared as yet. He found an account of his encounter the night before, or rather, a version of it. The front page was largely taken up by a screaming headline.
Brutal assault! Miners beaten and robbed, all-out manhunt by Raul Hernandez. The peace and tranquility of Sunday evening in Rhyolite was marred by an attack on 2 miners on their way home from church. They were both found unconscious by the patrolman in an alley half a block behind Golden Street. One of the men, identified as Fred Gorgon, remains in a coma, although doctors believe he will recover. The other miner, Dick Mullet, regained consciousness shortly after being removed to hospital. According to his account, he and Grogan were returning from a late evening prayer meeting when they were set upon by 5 or possibly 6 bandits, all wearing masks to disguise their features. The article went on in that vein, but Nathaniel had trouble finishing it without bursting into laughter. There was the part about the constable vowing to make every effort to apprehend the perpetrators because such activity would not be tolerated in Rhyolite. It concluded with Mullet's remark that he planned to leave Rhyolite and take up residence in Beatty, where there was law and order. Also, Omar doesn't live there,
Nathaniel muttered. He found the article about his new tattoo establishment on the second page. He guessed it would likely bring in a lot of new business. The Board of Trade was open. The same young lady was there reading what could have been the same magazine. Help you, sir? Nathaniel tucked the newspaper under his arm.
Would Mr. Kramer be in today?
Yes, sir. Did you have an appointment?
Not exactly, but I think he's expecting me.
He told her his name again. She looked puzzled in a vacant sort of way. Then she got up and went to the door and back, knocked and opened it a crack. Nathaniel heard her murmur. Then she motioned to him. Mr. Kramer says he can spare you a moment. Nathaniel gave her a smile before entering the office. Kramer, or Preen, was leaning back in a leather chair, hands clasped behind his neck. A cigar smoldered in an ashtray.
Hello, Milton,
Nathaniel said as the door closed behind him.
You're in error. The name is Kramer, Jebediah Kramer. Suit yourself, Jebediah.
He sat down without waiting for an invitation.
How have you been?
Kramer put his hands down and leaned forward. Nathaniel didn't miss the fact that a desk drawer was open, where Kramer could reach into it quickly.
Get to the point, Nathaniel.
Nathaniel opened the newspaper and put it down on the desk.
It appears you're having a crime wave in this town.
Kramer glanced at the headline.
I heard something about that. What does it have to do with me? Next time, you might want to send more than two,
Nathaniel said. He took off his hat. Kramer's eyes went to the bruise on his forehead, then narrowed.
I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you here, Nathaniel? Of course, I should have known I couldn't trust that brother of mine to keep his mouth shut. I guess he wants to spend the rest of his life as a storekeeper. All I wanted to do was help him get rich. How much is it going to cost me to get rid of you? Oh, you mean to keep me from revealing your true identity? To help you cover up a little thing like insurance fraud, among other things? Is that what you're worried about, Milton? Actually, it won't cost you a dime. Then what? I want to know about Annabelle, he said.
Kramer gave him a blank look.
What about her? I want to know what happened. What did you do to her? Now look, Nathaniel.
He stopped himself in mid-sentence, sat up straighter in his chair.
I haven't the least idea what happened to her or where she is, nor do I care. I was happy to get rid of the bitch. Why do you care? I heard she wouldn't give you the time of day after you went to prison. She dropped out of sight, and good riddance.
Snallygaster, Nathaniel said in a whisper.
What? Never mind. You can keep all your money. Milton, I don't need it. Don't you think killing yourself is an extreme way to get out of a marriage? And what does that mean? Exactly what I said. Milton Preen is dead, Jebediah. I know, because the police said so. That means Annabelle's no longer married. She's a widow.
Kramer's face shifted, as if he wasn't sure whether to frown or grin.
If you have no other business with me, Mr. Strange. Oh, but I do. I want to join the Board of Trade.
At that, Kramer's face went red.
I asked the secretary for an application form, he said at last. I'll see you get approved. I'll do that.
He rose to leave.
I'm not sure I believe you don't know anything, Jed. Maybe later you'll think of something else you might tell me. See you around.
As Nathaniel opened the door, Kramer picked up his cigar and put it back in his mouth. The rest of the day, Nathaniel spent walking around and checking out places he hadn't seen. He dropped into a barber shop and got a haircut. He and the barber talked about baseball. After that, he went to the Porter store, the one with the big windows, picked out a large piece of rawhide, and tied it in a tight roll. He watched a train pull into the station, passengers get on and off. He had one beer at the 66, then did some more walking. He couldn't explain why he felt uneasy. He wasn't happy about his conversation with Kramer. It had been quite some time since he'd received Kramer's typewritten note, and he'd been planning this encounter ever since, imagining how it would go. Now he wasn't sure what he had expected. It was possible Kramer told the truth, that he really didn't know where Annabelle was, in which case there wasn't much point to Nathaniel's coming here. Or if he was lying, there wasn't much he could do about it. Nathaniel considered the idea of revenge. He thought he should hate the man for ruining his life, but he found he didn't feel much of anything about Kramer, or Preen, or whatever he wanted to call himself. After all, he hadn't ruined Nathaniel's life. He had only changed it. He was sorry to have lost Annabelle. He wished he hadn't gone to prison, But aside from that, he discovered he was happier as a freelance tattoo artist than he'd ever been in the import-export business and painting occasional landscapes that rarely sold. And if all that led him here to Rhyolite, well, it wasn't such a bad town, and it was growing. He stopped at the market for fresh vegetables and some apples. It occurred to him that Kramer might not be too happy right about now. He'd be downright uncomfortable just having him around, and he'd definitely find it hard to believe that Nathaniel wanted neither money nor revenge. Well, let him keep his money. The longer he worried and sweated over it, the sooner he'd develop an ulcer. Back at the shop, there were 4 miners waiting to be illuminated. Nathaniel was in a good mood. Sally hadn't wandered off. She'd been sweeping and dusting. He gave her the rawhide to soak and unroll while he went to work. 2 of the miners had seen the story in the Herald, and they had told the other 2. Business was picking up. After supper, he gave Sally her first lesson in tattooing, with a handheld needle and black ink on the damp rawhide. After a while, she said, "This is harder than it looks," and flexed her stiff hand.
Rome wasn't built in a day, he told her. Only Rhyolite was.
Tuesday morning, early, Shoshone Bill turned up. Nathaniel asked if he wanted another tattoo.
No, sir. Not now, anyway. I just wanted to see you for a minute.
Puzzled, Nathaniel let him in the shop and invited him to sit down, but he declined. Bill seemed to be having trouble making up his mind what he wanted to say. That was all right, since there were no other clients yet. Nathaniel asked Sally to bring Bill a cup of coffee. In a few minutes, she brought in 2 heavy earthenware mugs full of steaming black brew. Nathaniel sat in the dentist's chair and watched Bill, who sipped his coffee standing.
Something on your mind, Bill? It's that rattlesnake,
he said in that low, soft-spoken way that Indians have.
I wanted you to know it worked. What do you mean? I thought you were headed out to do some more prospecting last week. Yes, I did. I checked out another place a few miles from here, where I noticed onset of 4. Seems funny, with all these folks wandering around over the desert out here, you could still find places nobody ever looked at afore. Just a little ways out of town at that. Anyways, I staked my burro so's I could climb up this hill to check out some quartz. I thought I saw, but I had a little trouble.
Bill stopped talking. Nathaniel let him have the time to collect his thoughts. He tasted the coffee. It was decent. Sally claimed she'd never made coffee in her life before meeting him.
What sort of trouble, Bill? My own fault. I got excited and fell down. Nearly broke my knee. Landed right on top of a sidewinder. My God, you mean a rattlesnake? Did it bite you? I guess it was about as surprised as I was. It reared itself back, getting ready to strike. But then it saw the snake on my arm and it backed off. Either it thought it was a brother snake who it should not hurt, or maybe it was afraid I was meaner than him. Anyway, it decided to run off. So I didn't get bit.
Nathaniel nodded, thinking about that.
Well, that's fine. That's really fine. Thank you for coming to tell me. I'm glad I could help you.
Bill reached into a pocket of his overalls, pulled out a cloth sack, and handed it to Nathaniel.
I wanted to give you this. Sort of a thank you present. What's this? You didn't have to. Don't know how much that's worth, but it ought to say out pretty good.
Nathaniel opened the sack and looked in. It was full of small crystals.
Pretty good ore, I think, Bill said. That's the reason I came back so soon. Now I guess I'll have to tell Mr. Kramer, but I wanted to give you some first.
Nathaniel's eyes widened.
You mean this is gold ore? The real thing? I've never actually seen what it might look like. Yes, sir. Pretty good, or I think. Well, thank you. I don't know what to say.
Then he came to a sudden decision. Sally had been peering over his shoulder, her nose almost in the bag. He snapped shut the drawstring. She yanked her head back as if afraid of losing her nose.
I tell you what, Bill. How about if you wait a couple or 3 days before you report this claim to Mr. Kramer? Be sure you don't tell anyone else. I'd like to get this oil sample assayed and find out exactly how good it is. Maybe we could work it so you get to keep the claim yourself, or at least a bigger share. Well, sir, whatever you say. But you see, I owe Mr. Kramer for the grub stake. Don't worry about that. I'll grub stake you myself. Now, you just go lie low somewhere. Come back and see me in 3 days. I should have the assay by then. Okay, Mr. Strange. I'll do what you say.
He put down the coffee mug and turned to go.
Bill, one other thing. Yes, sir. Do you happen to know where Mr. Kramer lives? Where his house is? Sure. That's where I goes to see him. Only he don't have a house. He lives out at the mine.
Nathaniel remembered the peculiar light he'd seen at the mine on Sunday night.
Thanks, Bill. You don't know what a help you've been.
Do you still think Indians are good luck? Sally asked when he'd gone.
This one is,
He said.
especially when I have to deal with the sidewinder.
Next day, he took Bill's ore sample down to the assay office, where he turned it over to a gaunt man wearing a green eye shade. We're really busy these days, the man said, but I should have your assay ready Thursday latest. At the shop, Sally worked with painstaking care at tattooing a figure 8 into a scrap of rawhide. She looked up when he came in. Do you think your snake picture really scared away that sidewinder? She asked.
Why not? Stranger things have happened. But don't go thinking there's any magic in my pictures. If there's magic, it's all Bill's.
She said. Do you have any other tattoos that you didn't show me? I mean, besides the snallygaster on your back? He sat down and stared out the front window at the street. He wondered how much it would cost to buy one of those electric fans.
Only one, he said, but it's not important. It ain't very good. A fella in prison gave it to me. I'm not sure now why I did it. I don't never show it to people.
Would you show it to me?
It's pretty small, he said. Nothing to look at.
He stared at her.
You think you know everything, but you don't. Not by a long shot.
Can I see it? She said. Slowly, he unbuttoned his shirt and pulled it open.
You have to come close to see it. It's tiny.
She got to her feet, put down her needle, and came over to stand before him. She bent over to look. It's hard to see under the hair on your chest. It's a letter. That's what they call calligraphy, ain't it?
Yes, I'm surprised you know that word. Calligraphy is what they use to do to illuminate books and manuscripts. Illumination. Fancy letters. Can you even make out what letter it is?
Sure. I seen that in fancy Bibles. It's a letter A in red ink.
A for Annabelle,
He said. Then he closed his shirt.
You don't know much at all,
He muttered. He got up and went back out to his wagon in the alley. On Thursday, Nathaniel went down to the assay office to pick up his report. He carried it back to his shop without opening it. When he walked in, Sally said, You got a letter.
What do you mean, a letter?
You know, mail, U.S. mail, in an envelope with a stamp on it. It's from back east. I didn't open it.
I should hope not. How did you happen to get hold of a letter addressed to me? Nobody back east knows I'm here, except for Milton's brother. I've never even bothered to go to the post office. Why would Alfred write to me?
Mr. Hernandez brought it over. He went down to the P.O. to pick up mail for the Herald. There was a letter for me. The postal clerk asked him, as long as he was going to deliver that one, could he bring over yours too? He said it's been there on general delivery 4 days.
Nathaniel shook his head, as if trying to clear his ears. Sally, why would a letter for you go to the Herald's box? In fact, why would anyone write to you here in the first place? I thought nobody knew your whereabouts.
She raised her nose, looking loftily out the window. I guess someone does now. Mr. Hernandez helped me send one of my pictures to the Nevada Review. Want to see what they sent me? Nathaniel had a sudden sense that things were happening too quickly for him to take in. He took the envelope she handed to him and removed a sheet of paper. Dear Miss Jezebel, thank you for sending us your delightful illustration of a desert sidewinder. We would like to use it on the cover of our next issue and would be delighted to see more of your work. Enclosed, you will find a check for $40.
My God, Nathaniel said, that's more than a lot of people earn in a month.
She favored him with a smirk. That's why I needed to open a bank account so I can cash the check. On impulse, he seized her and gave her a bear hug. She went stiff as a board, but at least she didn't scream.
That's fine, Sally. That is really and truly fine. I'm right proud of you.
Does you want to see your letter now?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. My letter.
She handed him another envelope. From the return address, he could see it was indeed from Milton's brother, Alfred. Inside was one sheet of paper, written in a tiny, precise copperplate hand. Dear Mr. Strange, I hope this finds you well. I hope you will not think it odd, my writing to you, but I find it my moral duty to do so. I feel it my obligation to apprise you of 2 facts. The first, regarding my brother Milton. On giving this matter due consideration, and in view of my past associations with Milton, I must confess I do not feel it likely that his invitation to me to join him in the West had my own best interest at heart. Milton's first motivation has always been one of monetary profit for himself. I feel that his wish to entice me out west could only have been for the purpose of somehow tapping into my own financial resources. No doubt he had some dubious investment scheme in mind. This reflection leads me to the inevitable conclusion that Milton may not be as financially prosperous as he pretends. I say this only to caution you to avoid becoming embroiled in any economic projects which my brother may conceivably propose to you. A word to the wise is sufficient. The other matter which concerns me is Mrs. Annabel Preen. It is time to confess that I have been aware of her whereabouts for some time now. She made me swear not to reveal her location to you. You must understand that she was convinced of your guilt after the trial. However, now that it appears my brother is still alive, the picture has changed. I felt it incumbent on me to reveal Milton's letter to Annabel. For several years, she has been devoting herself to good works, employed in helping to operate an orphanage and shelter for the poor in Pennsylvania. On seeing Milton's letter, she was, of course, confused and astonished. She was still not convinced he is still alive or that you are innocent. For this reason, she did not give me permission to reveal her location, and I have not done so. But I must tell you that she has just communicated with me. After thinking the problem over for several days, she has resolved that her only possible course of action is to investigate the matter for herself. She therefore expresses her intention to travel to Rhyolite by train and to attempt to locate her late husband, Milton. This decision on her part frankly fills me with misgivings, but I fear it is too late to convince her otherwise, since I believe she is already departed. I felt it my obligation to warn you of Annabel's arrival, Mr. Strange. Please be prepared for anything and be careful. Very truly yours, Alfred Preen. He hurriedly turned and dropped into the dentist's chair. Sally was studying him. It wasn't just a question look, it was an "are you all right" look. He handed her the letter. She read it slowly, perhaps having trouble with some of the words. Then she read it a second time and handed it back.
You don't have any nosy questions?
He asked. Were you really going to run away together? You didn't make up that part?
Yeah, we were really going to do that.
Well, that's fine. I'm right proud of you, Nathaniel. I think I'll make some lunch now. For the next 2 or 3 hours, he completely forgot about the report from the assay office. He just sat in the dentist's chair, thinking. Then Shoshone Bill came to the door.
You tell me come back in 3 days,
He said.
Oh, yeah, I didn't I? Come in, Bill.
Bill again refused to sit down. Nathaniel found the report on the table where he dropped it and tore open the envelope. He scanned the contents.
Well, I don't understand all the geology stuff, but it looks good. That's high-grade ore you found.
He dropped the report on his desk.
Could be just a pocket, Bill said. With a pocket mine, you could take out a few $100, maybe even 3,000-4,000. But then the ore's gone. No point in mining anymore. In other words, we don't know exactly what we have yet.
From inside his jacket, he pulled out a purse and extracted some bills.
Here's $20 towards your grub stake. You say this claim is only a few miles out of town? About 10 miles. Good enough. You and me will go to locate it. For now, I want you to stay in town. Stay out of sight. Stay out of the saloons. Come Sunday, you and me and your burro are heading out. I'll have the papers with me. We'll stake the claim in my name, but you're going to be my partner, Bill. Then we'll see what happens. Mr. Kramer, he won't like this. You leave Mr. Kramer to me.
Next day, he dropped in on Edmund J. Fish at his realty office.
Sure, Fish said. I can help you file a claim. I didn't know you were in that sort of business. I have a partner. He can find gold, but he can't fill out papers too well. And that's what people like me do for a living.
He got the proper forms from a filing cabinet, showed Nathaniel what to do, and told him to bring back a copy when it was done. Nathaniel got up to go.
Oh, one other thing. I'm expecting a visitor from the east, a cousin. Her name is Annabel Preen, but she may not know exactly where to find me. I was thinking there's a chance she might come here looking for a house to rent or even a room. If you should happen to run into her, why, I'll be sure you two make contact. Annabel Preen, you say.
He scrawled the name on a notepad. This was on Friday. Preen or Kramer wouldn't be at the Board of Trade till Monday. He didn't want to wait that long. That afternoon, just before shift change, he put up the closed sign and headed out. Sally wanted to know where he was going.
To visit an old business partner, he said. If I don't come back, tell the constable.
She bit her lower lip as he turned to go. The mine was only a mile walk beyond the edge of town, but the sun burned hot, the air still and sultry. He didn't think he'd ever get used to the heat in this place. At least it was cooler at night. He had no problem getting into the mine. Hundreds of miners were coming in and going out. Indeed, a big operation. He didn't see any watchmen around. He knew where to go, that outbuilding where he'd seen the solitary lights. It looked like a cabin, or maybe an office. He picked his way down the narrow slope and knocked on the door.
It isn't locked,
Kramer said from within. Nathaniel pushed the door open and entered. Kramer was sitting at a rough table with some papers spread out on it. He looked up, then his eyes widened in alarm.
Relax, Milton. I'm not here for violence. What do you mean? How did you find me?
Nathaniel sat down on a nearby bench. He gestured at the rough, unpainted walls.
I figured you'd be living in the lap of luxury. You might offer me a drink of water.
Kramer waved at a jug in the corner.
Help yourself. What do you want from me, Nathaniel?
Nathaniel took his time pouring water into a tin cup and then tipped his head for a long, slow draft.
Just a simple business deal, he said. I'd like to buy out Shoshone Bill's grub estate.
Kramer's lips lifted in a tiny grin.
I knew you had an angle. That probably means Bill has found a strike, or thinks he has, or maybe you think he has. Hell, why not? For my old business partner, there's plenty gold out here to go around. $300 and anything he finds is yours.
Nathaniel guessed that amount was likely twice what Kramer had actually put up. Of course, he had a legal right to make a profit.
I don't have that much in cash right now, he said. Will you take 50 with a note for the rest? Sure. I have my secretary do the paperwork and leave it for you at the bank. Whenever you're ready. Look here, Nathaniel. Just to show that I know hard feelings, I could set you up with a better investment opportunity. You'd make more money buying some shares in this mine or in the railroad. If you want to come and see me at the stock exchange.
Nathaniel stood up. He wasn't smiling.
No, that's fine, Milton. You keep your investments. You know I was always an independent operator at heart. Besides,
he turned and opened the door.
Besides, Milton, there are still hard feelings.
He went out into the night, leaving the door ajar so that Kramer would have to get up and close it himself. On Saturday, he hunted up Shoshone Bill at the livery stable. Nathaniel bought 2 more pack animals. Bill recommended burros.
You don't want to take no horses nor mules out in the desert, Bill told him. A burro can always find water.
Then they bought some more supplies, enough food for 3 or 4 days, and whatever gear Bill said they needed. Bill promised to be ready at dawn Sunday. As Nathaniel had predicted, there was a crowd of clients at the shop when the mine shift changed. He had to turn some of them away. He worked for 5 hours, doing 5 tattoos. It was late by the time he was finished. Sally had managed some bean soup and cornbread for supper. He showed her how he appreciated her effort by having a second helping. She sat and stared at him while he ate. "Why are you going into the desert tomorrow?" she asked.
Nosy little critter, ain't you?
Then he winked at her and became serious.
It's Annabelle. I came to this town hoping to get Milton to tell me where Annabelle is. Things haven't worked out exactly that way, but it appears I have a good chance of talking to her again. For all I know, she could be here already. I don't know what's going to happen when me and her meet, but I feel like she's owed something. When Milton disappeared, when I murdered him, he took off with all the money. Some of it wasn't even his. It properly belonged to Annabelle, what she inherited from her parents. Milton had no call to leave her with nothing. I guess he was mad because he found out we were going to run away together. But he didn't have to take it out on Annabelle. He should have been satisfied to send me to prison. Hell, I could have hanged. You might call what I'm doing revenge, if you like. Milton loves his money more than anything. That's good bullfrog ore. That's good float gold that Bill found. Green quartz, what they call bullfrog ore. Milton doesn't suspect yet. I think he believes I'm trying to run a swindle, the way he likes to do himself. When he finds out what he signed away, he'll be downright incensed.
You mean you're going to give that gold to Annabelle when you see her? Sally asked.
My share of it, Bill gets half. That alone ought to give Milton a conniption fit. The rest goes to Annabelle. If she won't take it, I'll donate it to that orphanage she works for. It's only part of what Milton owes her.
How much do you think is out there? Sally asked.
He shrugged. From what Bill says, there must be a few $1,000s worth at least, just lying on top of the ground. Once they start mining, there's no telling. Of course, I'm no miner. We'll just carry out what we can, then sell the claim. There might be millions under the surface.
She gave a low whistle. Millions. I guess you'll want me to close up the shop while you're gone.
Now, don't you go getting any ideas, Miss Sally. You're not ready to start tattooing.
Hey, I'm getting pretty good with that rawhide. But don't worry, I'm going to make some more drawings for the Nevada Review and maybe the Herald.
That's a relief.
He turned and stared out the front window at the dark street.
I wonder what it's like out there at night in the desert.
Better you than me, she said.